Was in Saudi Arabia today, and I'm going to talk about that. I got a few people I replied to on Twitter. I'm going to read you those, and then I've got a list of people. A list of quotes from the speech. I found a transcript of the speech, and the transcript appears to be before he said it out loud. So there are some portions of the speech that were different audibly than in the text here. So the quotes I have are pretty close, but they might not be exact. So starting with the tweets, I'm going to go with somebody right-leaning and somebody left-leaning here, tweets that I replied to pertaining to the Trump speech today in Saudi Arabia. He wasn't speaking to just Saudi Arabia. He's speaking to 50 leaders of nations, Arab nations. I think most of them probably Islamic nations. He's speaking there because he's starting his tour his first overseas tour, speaking to in locations where the three major religions. So he's going to talk to Islam and Judaism and then Christianity. So he's going to Saudi Arabia, and then he's going to Israel, and he's going to the Vatican. So here, his first stop in Saudi Arabia, he's talking to these 50 nations, and people are focusing on Saudi Arabia. They keep saying, oh, well, he's talking to Saudi Arabia, and they do this and that and such and such. He's talking to 50 nations, guy. He just happens to be in Saudi Arabia, but he's addressing everyone. So that line of thinking, if you see somebody saying that, but Saudi Arabia, just bring up the fact that he's talking to 50 nations and that they're totally blowing that out of the conversation when they bring up just Saudi Arabia. Anyway, so start with the first one here. Tulsi Gabbard. You guys know Tulsi Gabbard. She quit the DNC because of the corrupt nature of suppressing Bernie's rise to fame there. She didn't like that, and she quit her spot there as a chairwoman. She's from Hawaii. She is on the same page as Trump when it comes to Syria, I believe. A lot of people on the right might disagree with her on that. But here's what she had to say about Trump and Saudi Arabia. She said, Trump's support of Saudi Arabia, a brutal theocracy and biggest sponsor of terrorism, and the Wahhabi Salafi ideology fueling it, is a huge betrayal. Now, we don't need to discuss whether Saudi Arabia is worse than Iran when it comes to sponsoring terrorism. We know that there are groups in both Saudi Arabia and groups in Iran that support terrorism and terrorists, and there are bad sects of Islam in both of those. I think she's missing the point of his speech, missing the point of talking to 50 leaders, not just Saudi Arabia. He's not there to tell them what to do. He's not there to chide them for not having as much women's rights as the freest nation on the planet, the United States. So when I replied to her, I gave a quote from the speech, said, we must seek partners, not perfection. And that's just the perfect response to that we're not trying to be perfect here and say, hey, you know what? We think that Islam is a slippery slope to terrorism, and we think that you're keeping your women in bags and you should allow them to drive. Like, no, that's not what he's there for. So she's completely missing the point of what he's there for, and she's missing the point that he's talking to 50 nations and not just Saudi Arabia. But Ben Shapiro did the same thing. He said, sorry to break it to people, but, quote, guys, terrorism is bad. Can you help out? End quote, is not a policy. So he's saying that Trump going there and just basically telling them terrorism is bad is not policy. He says, no carrot, no stick, just bemoaning. Well, what's a carrot and a stick? It's trying to make them do something, right? We're not going over there to try to make them believe the way we do or do things the way we do. We're not trying to give them a carrot so they come and do what we do, and then we're not trying to give them a stick, threaten them with a stick so they do what we want them to do. That's not what he was there for. So both Ben Shapiro on the right and Tulsi Gabbard on the left are getting this wrong. They're not understanding the point of going over there. Some other people did say that the speech was just empty, that if we're not going to go over there and tell them what's up, then there's no point. Well, there is a point. The point is to reach out, to give a good first impression, to change their impression of what Trump is and what he's trying to say, because there's a lot of good things in the speech that I'm going to get to. But my response to Ben Shapiro's tweet here was the three policies that were put forward, and it's a little vague because he didn't go into specifics on the policies, but there were three centers that appear to be forming, so here, the three are the Global Center for Combating Extremist Ideology, right? That's something that started today. The Terrorist Financing Targeting Center, which started today. And then the Center to Counter Online Spread of Hate, which, assuming that means terrorism related or extremist related, not necessarily like Islamophobic stuff. So those three he mentions, and I'm going to get to that here in a second. But those are actual progressive policies. Like, those are something that Obama could agree with and Trump agrees with. Like, people should be able to be applauding that. But yet Ben Shapiro says that he didn't have a policy going over there. No, he did. He's getting stuff done. He's working with 50 nations, remember, to do these counterterrorism things. And that's an important first step. You can't go over there and start talking about letting women drive in Saudi Arabia specifically when the point is to end terrorism. And you need to have a good starting point. And here, let me get to the speech, because this is going to cover it again in detail. In the beginning of the speech, he says, quote, "In my inaugural address to the American people, I pledge to strengthen America's oldest friendships and build new partnerships in pursuit of peace. I also promise that America will not seek to impose our way of life on others, but to outstretch our hands in the spirit of cooperation and trust," end quote. That's what he's there for, folks. Like, if you're trying to say that he didn't tell them what's up and tell them that they're committing human rights violations and blah, 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 that's not the point of his trip. I keep repeating myself, sorry. But that's a great way to open this, talking about building partnerships in pursuit of peace, not imposing our way of life on others. You got to have a starting ground with these people, right? This is his first trip overseas. He's not going to come out swinging. I mean, he kind of did. He talked about Islamism. He took better steps than Obama did. He's speaking the language that I understand. He's speaking the language that I've understood for over a decade about what Islam is and how it affects people in the Middle East, because it does affect more people in the Middle East. Here's another thing he said about Muslim victims. "But in sheer numbers, the deadliest toll has been exacted on the innocent people of Arab, Muslim, and Middle Eastern nations. They have borne the brunt of the killings and the worst of the destruction in this wave of fanatical violence. Some estimates hold that more than 95% of the victims of terrorism are themselves Muslim." He's going over there with empathy and telling these people, look, I'm here with you, here in support of ending this terrorism that's plaguing your people just as much as it is mine. And if all you people on the right want to say, no, hey, wait a minute, there's this such and such happened in history where Muslims aren't the biggest victim, or Christians are the biggest victim, and blah, 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 you're splitting hairs. You're not getting the point of looking at the present and the future. You're going to look at what's happening now and where we're going. And it's a good thing for him to go over there and empathize with these people, that they are also being attacked by Islamic extremists. Okay? These are things I've understood my whole entire adult life, that Muslims are victims of terrorism, because when you leave the Muslim faith, some people think that is a punishable offense. That's, you can kill these people if they leave the faith. Like, a lot of people believe that. And so that happens to they're in the vicinity of the terrorists. Who's in the vicinity of terrorists? The Islamic terrorists? Other Muslims. So they're going to get the brunt of the effects. Okay? People on the right have to come to grips with that. Like, I don't think it's a large amount of people that say this, but I do see it often, and I don't know how. I mean, because sometimes it's hard to tell. But anyways, here's what he had to say about the 3 centers that they were opening or starting. I got 3 different quotes here I pulled from the speech. "Later today, we will make history again with the opening of a new global center for combating extremist ideology located right here in this central part of the Islamic world. This groundbreaking new center represents a clear declaration that Muslim-majority countries must take the lead in combating radicalization, and I want to express our gratitude to King Solomon for this strong demonstration of leadership." So that's a center right there for combating extremist ideology. That's one of the things that came out of this. Second one, "I'm proud to announce that the nations here today will be signing an agreement to prevent the financing of terrorism, called the Terrorist Financing Targeting Center, co-chaired by the United States and Saudi Arabia, and joined by every member of the Gulf Cooperation Council." So that's something working with all of these nations to combat financing terrorism. I don't know if Iran was there, if they had representatives there, because he was ripping on Iran. And if they're sponsoring terrorism more than Saudi Arabia is, who knows, then they're taking steps to prevent that, and that's a good thing. Third one, "The United Arab Emirates has also engaged in a battle for hearts and souls, and with the U.S. launched a center to counter online spread of hate." Sounds like censorship. It sounds pretty vague. There's no other details given, but it sounds like another step towards ending radicalization, which is important. And those are the three important things that have come out of this speech in Saudi Arabia. One of the more controversial things that he said, let me just read it. Quote, Saudi Arabia is home to the holiest sites and one of the world's great faiths. Each year, millions of Muslims come from around the world to Saudi Arabia to take part in the Hajj. People stopped at that first, that's two sentences. People stopped at that first sentence to chide him on calling Islam one of the world's greatest faiths. Well, why don't you put that sentence in context and realize that it actually is a beautiful thing and an amazing, great thing that so many people travel from all over the world to go there because they have this strong belief in their religion. It's a powerful thing, and the word great isn't unnecessary there. The word great for calling Islam one of the great faiths, it's going to be the greatest faith in the world in our lifetime because it's going to be the most populous faith. Islam is going to be the largest faith in the world, in the world in our lifetime. Yet all these leftist people in America want to still claim that they're an oppressed minority. I get it that Islam is not a large majority religion in America, but to say that these people coming from the Middle East are minorities, they're gonna be a minority in the United States, but their religion is a majority religion in the world, and the most oppression that Muslims are getting is not from Donald Trump. It's from other Muslim leaders and other extremist groups. That's what we need to help. We need to help reform Islam and reform these nations so they can combat terrorism. And leftists putting people like Majid Nawaz and Ayaan Hirsi Ali on what list was that? The Southern Poverty Law Center's list of anti-Muslim extremists. These are people helping, and they need to be lifted up and praised. And it's not making any sense what the left is doing with those people right now. And this thing that he said about Saudi Arabia hosting one of the world's great faiths, it's not controversial. It's not stupid of him to say. It's not hypocritical. It's not any of that. It's fine. It's perfectly fine in context with what he's saying. That there's did you see that place where he was giving the speech at? It was beautiful. It was magnificent. It just looked like the Trump Towers. Right? So it is a great thing. It's a great religion that has produced great artwork, and great is a broad word, and great doesn't mean it's the most quality religion or it's a quality human rights religion. He didn't say any of that. He said great. It's vague. It doesn't matter. People ripping him for this need to just chill out. I can rip him for one thing though. Here's a no true Scotsman basically that he said, quote, every time a terrorist murders an innocent person and falsely invokes the name of God, it should be an insult to every person of faith. Terrorists do not worship God, they worship death. Look, he's not going to go over there and tell people that Islam is a slippery slope to terrorism. That's not what he's there to do. And if he's going to run this same line of thinking that Obama and the leftists are, that people that commit terror aren't true Muslims, everybody else is saying it, he's going to say it. If that's what they want to hear, if that's what helps, listen, what's going to help reduce the amount of terrorism in the world? Is it making people hate us more because we tell them that their religion, their entire religion, leads to terrorism? Or is it going to help combat terrorism more if we align with them and say, look, we understand that there are good people in your faith and that some people are using it in terrible ways and wrong ways. It's parsing words, I think. I completely disagree that terrorists don't worship God, they worship death. I disagree with that, but I don't think it needs to be not said. I don't think it matters very much that it's said to them. You know what I mean? I disagree with this. I'm not going to bash Trump for saying it. I think he gets it. But again, the point of his trip wasn't to go over there and divulge everything that's in his head that he believes about Islam. That would be a bad thing. I think this is a good speech. Before I read the last quote here I have from the speech, I want to go back to one other tweet that came out because it's kind of a superfluous thing. But this person said, Obama's 2009 Cairo speech to the Muslim world, 6,000 words. Trump's 2017 Saudi speech to the Muslim world, 3,400 words. And that's all they said. sometimes less is more. Trump spent way less money on his presidency, his candidacy for president, and he won. He spent way less words talking to the Muslim world, and I think he got across a great message that was a little more nuanced than Obama's, and it wasn't abrasive, and it didn't probably leave many people with a bad taste in their mouth unless they thought he was being insincere. I think why don't these people get that less is more? Like, he spent less money and they'll rip him for it. He used less words, they'll rip him for anything. It's so stupid. Let me read the last quote I have here from the speech. It was a long speech. I mean, not as long as Obama's. Shut up. Nobody cares. We in this room are the leaders of our peoples. They look to us for answers and for action. And when we look back at their faces, behind every pair of eyes is a soul that yearns for justice. I wish he had said, behind every pair of eyes is a soul that yearns for freedom and liberty. But he said the word justice instead. He used the word justice one other time in the speech, and he only used the word free. I don't think he used the word freedom. He used the word free in the speech twice, and he said free from fear and free from extremism. He's talking about these people in the Muslim world, the Arab world, in these 50 nations, being free from fear of terrorism, being free from extremism. That was the point of him going over there. That's the first step he wanted to take. And I can't fault him for that, and I agree with it. And this talking about behind every pair of eyes is a soul that yearns for justice, that is something that needs to be said, and that does go to women not being able to drive cars, and women not being able to do a lot of other things that men can, and these weird, just absolutely weird mental gymnastics they do with the Sharia law, where there's different versions of Sharia law, and Sharia law is supposed to be good because it gives women money from... There's too many versions, and it's easy to say Sharia law is bad, but in their eyes, it helps women in marriage and divorce and whatever. So when he says, when he focuses on justice instead of freedom and liberty, that's the speech he was given. He wasn't given the speech that, hey, you guys need more freedom, hey, you guys need more liberty. It's they want justice for the atrocities that are committed against them by religious extremists. I don't have much else to say about his speech. I thought it was okay. It was fine. It wasn't magnificent. It wasn't terrible. And people telling you that it was magnificent, people telling you it was terrible, they're both wrong. That's all I have to say.